Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavati Paskatyadi Satarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaura Trishe Namaha Namo Ramanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagatitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Queridos devotees, my dear devotees, friends, all those who are participating in this Krishna conscious movement in one way or another, in one mission or another. To all of you, I'm sending these reflections for the benefit of the Krishna conscious movement. And before I continue, I want to make one thing clear. I don't have the intention to offend anybody. I don't have the intention to make anybody feel bad. But sometimes things happening which make feel many devotees very bad. Mistakes done by sometimes leaders, mostly leaders, because the leaders, they have more chance to make big mistakes because they have the big position. But you can steal from Krishna even as a Sankirtan devotee by not giving all you collected for Krishna to the temple and keeping something which is not supposed to be kept. That is minor, and that is what you collected, kind of. But those who receive the donations collected by others, which sometimes are big sums, they have to be held accountable for this. So whenever the administration is not transparent, then we have to learn a lot. We have to learn a lot. This is a fact. As far as Srila Prabhupada is concerned, he made it very clear. He said, every far thing, every penny which is donated to Krishna has to be noted down as it comes in the temple. And every penny which goes out for the service of Krishna must also be accounted. And then there has to be a balance every week, every month, and a transparency board of accountants or senior devotees or whoever it is, make sure this is honest. What's happening here is actually an honest transaction on behalf of Krishna. You see, when you organize in the material world a foundation, or you organize a non-profit society, or you organize a church, then it is to be understood that this is not a private business. This is not to enrich individuals. If there are some monetary benefits coming, and if they're distributed in the form of food distribution, in the form of making a beautiful temple, in the form of even helping devotees in their great necessities, like helping them to have a dress, is like a type of maintenance expenditures. There's nothing wrong with that. That is perfectly clean and clear, and it can be accounted for. But when the leaders having private bank accounts, which are not accounted for to anybody, when they have their personal collectors rather than a temple organization which monitors and controls everything, then things may turn out another way. Transparency, a transcendental, transparent transmission that was promised by Srila Prabhupada to the world. And I deduct that the management of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in the same way. And any gaudiya Math should also follow the same principle, because even that is according to the law. Because if you have a non-profit society or you're collecting on behalf of a religious motivation or project, then it should be guaranteed that it goes that way. Anyhow, this is a very extensive subject, and it may actually be boring to those who don't like administration and says, I chant Hare Krishna and that's all. I just want to remind you, at least in my education, we joined the Sankirtan party and we were sent out every day to distribute books, sometimes records, music recordings, sometimes magazines, sometimes big books. And everything we collected, everything was given to the treasurer on the weekend. Why on the weekend? Because we had buses, and we were always 4 or 5 people in the bus. Of course, we had a treasurer in the bus also, got every night the collection of everybody. The weekend it was turned over in the temple to the main administration. And we didn't derive a percentage, we didn't derive any kind of salary or anything. No, it was our enthusiasm, it was our life that we were collecting on behalf of our spiritual master. Now, that was a brahmachari life, and I learned to live it and to love it. As a matter of fact, I never changed it to another status where I had a personal economy as a grihasta or anything like that, because at the age of 24, I entered into the sannyas ashram by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and later in 1984, that was again confirmed by Srila Bhakti Sridhar Maharaj. So this sannyas ashram is not the subject. We are talking about transparency in managing Krishna's money. Yes, there has been loopholes for thieves here and there. Even at the time of Srila Prabhupada, I was so surprised when I went to India to find out that some of the poor Bengalis who had joined the movement all of a sudden were owning this house or that house. I said, how is it possible? How do they own a house now? We as brahmacharis, we don't own even a bicycle. So I was wondering what kind of administration are they having there in Maya. But then again, I was there just for a few days and I went back and continued my life. I wasn't really absorbed so much. Anyway, that's another subject. A subject which we will deal in other moments when people have the responsibility over the life of others. What is their responsibility? How can they do it? Because managing the life of others is more delicate than managing the money But the money is Lakshmi. The Lakshmi wants to be at the feet of Narayan. If anybody wants to take the Lakshmi away from the feet of Narayan, then he's Ravana and he will be held accountable. If somebody makes it and steals something from Srila Prabhupada or from any Gaudiya temple, yeah, he'll probably have to pay it back in many, many lifetimes of service. I don't know. Krishna knows how to deal with these things. It's not my problem. But I know that transparency is essential. And that's for every individual project also, because some people, they became very expert in creating other departments, and the departments became very opulent, and they got money, maybe from the BBT or from this or from that. And then again, the rumor arose that people are taking money for their personal benefit. Now here comes a point. What about a grihasta? Is he entitled to receive a salary? Srila Prabhupada answered, yes. If he is producing something very serious and important for Prabhupada's movement, he is entitled to receive a maintenance, not a salary, a maintenance, something so that he can live the way of his service. How does it look exactly? That's up to the local management, but we know that principle existed and Prabhupada applied it. He even allowed certain circumstances that people who did fundraising on behalf of the movement were given a maintenance percentage or something like that. Even that's bona fide, even legally bona fide, but it has to be recorded. It has to be transparent. Otherwise, they asked in a religious gathering how people in different religions manage the donations of the faithful people. First, a Christian pastor came and he said, we draw a line on the ground. And then we take all the donations, throw it in the sky. What falls on the right side, that's for the church, for God. What falls on the left side, that's for us, his servants. Then the Muslim came. He said, no, we do it different. We draw a circle on the ground. And again, we throw all the Lakshmi in the air. And then what falls in the center, that's for the Lord. He's the center. What falls on the outside of the circle, that is for us. Then a Jewish rabbi came. Says, we handle these things quite different, he said. We take all the donations and we throw them in the sky just like you do. And we say, God, take whatever you need. And whatever falls down, that's for us. So this kind of joke has been told here and there. But as far as the Krishna consciousness philosophy is concerned, even the Grihastha should give 50% of his normal income, his profit of his job or whatever he has, to the service of the spiritual master. I know that not many people have done it. Of course, some people did who take Prabhupada very solid as the authority of everything, but the majority, I guess not. Maybe they give 5%, 10%, 15, 20, who knows. But if you make your money outside, in your job, in your business, it is your generosity by the way you manage the funds. But more delicate is it if you're involved in the management of the temple. If you're dealing with those donations which brahmacharis have collected or donors have given to Krishna, that has to be so transparent that it is beyond the shadow of a doubt. I mean, if sannyasis, who are spiritual masters, have access to a lot of wealth, if they can do to manage it, to make wonderful things for Srila Prabhupada, I don't think there's any objection. But they have to follow the system Prabhupada established, transparent system. And I don't really see that very much. As a matter of fact, it's a kind of a faux pas. You're not supposed to talk about it. If you question the integrity of the leaders, you are easily removed from your service or from the movement from the comfort zone, so that you will go away and stop disturbing the local arrangements. Now, many big examples happened in the past. One time, a temple in the United States, in Hawaii, was sold by some GBC who went flaky. So he sold the devotee's temple because somehow or other he had the signature for that, took the money and took off. And the devotees were informed by somebody that we own this building now. So what a terrible situation. Nevertheless, Prabhupada tried to preach to this person later to come to his senses. Such situations have been there. I guess not only one or two or three, maybe hundreds or thousands. I don't know. I never took much interest in this type of subject. But maybe Krishna can forgive it. Maybe somebody can reimburse Krishna for what he took from him. I don't know. But I know that this is not correct. And if we do not keep transparency in the administration of how we deal with Krishna's most beloved devotees and Lakshmi and the deities, then we will start committing aparat. And aparat means against Radha. We are losing the path of devotional service, which came down by the grace of Srimati Radharani. So this is very important. And we can learn from the mistakes, because we are not interested to point to the error of individuals, because the error of the individual is the karma of the individual, and he'll have to face it anyway. But we want to point out to the importance of the transparency and for example, in South America, in our management, we have the temple management and we have two guardians, Brahminical guardians. They have the right to know everything what's happening in the temple, but they don't manage the money and they're not part of the administration, but they have the right to know everything. And if anything goes wrong, they're the ones who can break the news to other devotees, senior devotees, to correct the error. So this has been our system in South America. Everybody may have this or that system, a very strict accounting. There's different No, there's not different. Accounting is a one straightforward system. Income, expenditure, balances, and all that. And a governing board to make the decisions. That is another big thing. Who makes the decisions? Like one time, it was when Hans-Dutta left Europe. It was quite a scandalous time which Prabhupada suffered. You know, Prabhupada suffered so much with us, his disciples. So at that time, I had been the Sankirtan leader in north of Europe. For several years, I was traveling Scandinavia, England, Holland, Belgium, Germany, all around. And at that occasion, Hans-Dutta left. He left, he went to India. And he took many devotees with him. Practically, the German yatra was falling apart because many of the devotees who liked Hans-Dutta went with him to India. They spent the money, they bought like 5 huge buses because we were collecting a lot. We had good amount of luxury. So then I was invited by Jaya Tirsa and Vedavyas. They were kind of leader in that moment there in Schloss Rettershof. They asked me, why don't you take the leadership of the Sankirtan again? You know how to do that, to enthuse everybody, to collect. So I said, yes, I can do that, but only if you also put me on the board of where the decisions are taken, how to spend this money for Krishna. Oh, they said, you want to know that? No, 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 you have no business there. Then we rather renounce you as the Sankirtan leader. So I said, well, maybe it's time to move on. About that time, yes, then it doesn't matter. Anyway, I left Europe very soon afterwards. But this is the thing, the expenditure, there have to be a group of devotees who decide this. And if it is a spiritual master and if he is doing it, then he has to make sure that everything is in protection. For example, a property. You cannot register a property in a private name if you want to say it's Krishna's. It will not work. And even if you have a administrative board, if there's no security, if there's no safety that the people who are managing this board are transparent and transcendently oriented, then you may even lose a building. I went against that by putting on the papers of our properties, which we buy for Krishna, that they cannot be sold. Krishna's property is not for sale. And if they would have followed such a principle, Prabhupada would still have his skyscraper in New York, which he loved so much. It was such an outstanding success of Prabhupada's movement to have a skyscraper in Manhattan. But as things went, they didn't. And later in the US, we saw people wanted to sell the Miami Mandir, then they wanted to sell the Brooklyn Mandir. This idea of selling Prabhupada's property, that's quite, it happened frequently. They sold properties in England. Anyhow, this is not the point here. The point is that properties have to be properly registered for the service they are, and with a group of guardians. And one of the guardians becomes flaky, then the rest of the guardians immediately find another guardian for that person. That's what's missing. Same thing missing in the GBC, that if a GBC does something wrong in his temples, and nobody can touch him practically, unless he is sent to jail for murder or something like that. Very, very difficult. I discussed that in the previous. Uh, let's learn, let's heal, let's learn from the mistakes. Those great souls. And now I want to tell you one story. I'm going to share you one story, very intimate, which really shows how devotees should see things. There were a group of devotees who were so upset with the ISKCON leadership, with the fallen gurus and all that. They were so frustrated, bitter. So they went to Srila Bhakti Maharaj in Navadvip and started complaining and complaining. Then Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he told us a story. He asked, "Do you know Judas?" We looked at each other and said, "Judas? Yeah, of course we know Judas. He's a famous fellow from of the followers of Jesus." So he said, "So you know Judas?" After Judas sold Lord Jesus and took the silver coins, which they gave to him for selling his spiritual master. So he had the silver coins and he went into the crowd in the market, and then Jesus was coming with the cross on his back, going towards the crucifixion side. And Judas was amongst the crowd looking, and all of a sudden Jesus stopped. And he turned his head to the side, and he looked into the eyes of Judas for a long time. Then he looked down again and went up on his way to Golgotha. What happened to Judas? What did Judas see in the eyes of Jesus? What made him now throw away the coins and hang himself? What did he see? He saw gratefulness. You, Judas, did the most difficult of all services to me. You are now defamed. You are considered the worst of the worst. You'll go into the history. Your very name will be brandmarked as a traitor. All this you did for serving me so that my Leela can go this way, which was meant to go. Gratefulness. He saw gratefulness in the eyes of Jesus. He did not condemn him. That was too much. He awoke. The disciple in him awoke again. He was the cloud of illusion left him, and he said, "This is not possible. I cannot live one more moment with this money which I got from selling my guru." Then Srila Sridhar Maharaj looked at us and he said, "Do you know these GBCs and these gurus who have fallen down? They have done so much service to Prabhupada. They had so much close association. And now they're going this painful way of having to show the result of the abuse, the mistake. They are teaching us such a great lesson by their mistakes. We will be thankful to them for that. And surely Prabhupada and Krishna will give special mercy to them because they are the most merciful in the world. So when Srila Bhakti Rakshirmaj said that, we were all crying because we had suffered so much in ISKCON in these situations. We didn't know where to go, what to do. And even then, the lesson was not at the end. I guess the lesson will never end because the Krishna conscious movement is destined to go all around the world with millions of temples and millions of gurus and millions of wonderful projects. And we have to learn. Now ISKCON has taught us so many lessons, what not to do, and also many things what to do. Gaudiya Mata has taught us many, many lessons, what not to do, and also what to do. So we are very grateful to these institutions and the members of theirs. But we cannot ignore the mistakes to commit them again. So this is my humble request to you today to don't be bitter, be forgiving, be learning, learn, because you, on your shoulder, rests the Krishna conscious movement of today and of tomorrow. Again at your feet, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuva eva cha patitanang pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.